Welcome back. I'm Karen Magruder, and this video will present you a high-level overview of the basics of a community-based needs assessment. And this information would be helpful for studying for social work licensing exams or just use in your practice. The plan today is to describe what a needs assessment is, the purpose and goals, and how to conduct one. And then I'll also describe some of the theory and concepts, including the 4 A's of services and the definitions of the different types of needs that you can assess for in a needs assessment. Let's start by distinguishing the level of assessment here. So for this presentation, I'm talking about needs assessment, I'm focusing more on a macro level. So if you imagine on the micro level, think about our friends Timon and Pumbaa from The Lion King. Timon is an individual meerkat. If you were doing an assessment on Timon specifically, you might look at some of his needs, his strengths, his cross-species friendships and his sense of humor, for example, and seeing what specifically are his needs and opportunities. Whereas a more macro level, community-based needs assessment is looking at a whole colony of meerkats, if that's what they're called, and what does the whole community need as a whole, and how can we serve that entire population? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. The purpose then is to identify gaps in services and then using that information to guide how programs and agencies develop to meet those needs, with the top priorities being addressed first. Now, of course, we're going to be talking about needs, and that's going to lead us to discuss weaknesses, opportunities, gaps in services. But as any good social worker will tell you, we love the strengths perspective. And so we also want to balance out looking at what's missing by a complementary approach of recognizing what are those strengths, what are the resources that we can build up or leverage so that we're not reinventing the wheel and really empowering the community. In terms of steps of a needs assessment, the first thing you need to do is get your ducks in a row. So that includes defining what is the purpose, what are you trying to find out, what do you hope to gain from doing this needs assessment, figuring out the level of assessment. Is this looking at a neighborhood, a city, a county, even a state, or so forth? Who are the key stakeholders? So who can we partner with and collaborate with to both get their insight and also provide some valuable buy-in and connection from whatever community we're working with? And what's realistic in terms of budget and time allocations? Is there a budget at all for this? Maybe we can use gift cards to incentivize people to take a survey, or maybe we don't have funds available for that. And when does this information need to be completed by? How quick of a timeline are we talking here? You also want to look at what information is really needed. First, let's see what else is out there. What else is already in the community in terms of knowledge, data? Are there databases that you can access from the CDC or the Bureau of Labor Statistics or something like that that already has some of the information where you can gather information that already exists instead of seeking to find new information? But assuming you do decide you need to conduct a needs assessment here, then you need to, of course, make a plan. And that would include building your committee or team who is going to work on this with you. Again, making sure that you are being inclusive and collaborative and that everybody who needs to have a voice at the table is included. And then also determining what methods or instruments you use. So will you have a systematic process that includes interviews with key informants, or online surveys, or observations? How will you gather the information? Then you actually do the dang thing, collect and analyze that data. And once that's all done, you would prepare your report, start synthesizing it together in a way that is clear, concise, and easily digestible to someone who's not familiar with your study. Then you'd want to share your findings first with that inner circle of stakeholders. Who's in your immediate team? You'd want to do some fact-checking to make sure that the results you're coming up with seem accurate to the people that know the community most intimately. And then when everything seems all good, you would formally disseminate the results to other stakeholders, others who might have an interest in this information. It might be through directly giving information. It could be in publishing in either a peer-reviewed or more popular, like a newspaper or something like that. It could be posting it online and so forth. Now, in all of this, we need to also remember our ethical research methods. And we're not, riding in on a white horse to save the day. We're not just going in and doing these surveys. There are usually steps that need to be followed. Maybe that would be in just designing with best practices in research design so that our results are valid and reliable. It also might include informed consent, do no harm, maybe even getting IRB approval. So thinking through all of those things related to research methods when you're doing needs assessments. I'm going to also cover here the 4 A's that are often talked about in terms of the things you need to review when you're discussing what types of services are available or not available. The first, as you might expect, is availability. Are those services available? For example, maybe you work in substance use disorder treatment. Does medication-assisted therapy, or MAT, exist for adolescents in your community? Then there's awareness. Maybe services do exist, but there's a lack of public awareness in utilizing those services. You'll also want to consider accessibility. If those services are available, are they able to access them, either in terms of physical barriers like transportation, or more things like financial barriers, like accepting insurance when someone is uninsured or so forth. And finally, acceptability, which is looking more at the efficacy, quality, right? Are the services that exist good enough, meeting the needs of your population? Speaking of needs, there are generally 4 types of needs that you can assess in a needs assessment. Normative is based on an expert or knowledge of somebody who has expertise in the subject, usually looking at data. And so this might be a community leader, potentially a politician or a professor who does research in this area. A felt need could be more perceptions that are reported by your actual clients. They feel like this is something that's needed. Expressed need manifests in actual demand, like the number of people who are on a waiting list for services would be an expressed need. And finally, comparative needs, which is using ideally a representative sample to extrapolate what the needs are for a larger population. So say, for example, and this example from Royce et al., 2016, maybe you have a high-rise senior living community and you determine that in that community, 12% of your residents do not have any access to transportation. You might be able to extrapolate that then if that is representative and has external validity, perhaps other high-rises in the same city with a similar demographic would also have roughly 12% of the folks that live there who need access to transportation services. Ultimately, though, the bottom line here is that needs assessments should be collaborative. They should be inclusive. You should go in with an open mind about what you'll find rather than saying, this is what I know is the need and I'm just going to fit the data to agree with what I already think. You want to really show what it actually says about needs. And you should include those sound research methodologies as well.